So if we're gonna say the world of music and we say Motley Crue, right?
Right.
If we're gonna take the world of wrestling and we're gonna say what's the equivalent of Motley Crue, it's got to be the Nature Boy, Ric Flair.
Yeah,
Woo.
probably. Yeah. Yeah, I
So
loved Rick. I worked with Rick a couple of times. I had him in Toronto for I think it was like a 2 or 3 day promo trip. We got on like a house on fire. We just hit it off immediately. Actually, when I left the company, I moved a few months after I left the company, and I only kept two pieces of WWE memorabilia from my time there. One of them was Ric Flair's book, and the other one was it's a picture of Roddy Piper, Mean Gene, and Bobby Heenan throwing out the first pitch of the baseball game. That I took them to. I kept that as well. But yeah, Ric Flair's book, and he was in town to promote his book. And when I asked him to sign it, it was funny because when I asked him to sign it, I apologized because the back few pages of it were all like wrinkled. And he was like, "What happened to it?" I was like, "Oh, I was finishing it when I was sitting, like, finishing reading it." And I was sitting outside, and my kid sprayed me with the hose. The book got wet, and he closed the book and he looked at me. I'm like, "Oh my god, no!" He's offended that I let the book get wet or something. And he's like, "Wow, you're the only person I know who's actually read the whole thing."
I gotta tell you, Don, that when I was training to go into professional boxing, I was going to do a charity fight. So 2 years I'm training. Do not end up doing that, going to bodybuilding instead because it's a lot safer than boxing was.
Yeah.
While I'm on the treadmill, I'm supposed to be watching boxing matches and kind of picking up pieces. I like watching Ric Flair rants and watching Ric Flair taping his rants. And I don't know if there's ever been and there will ever be another speaker like Ric Flair. The stuff that he comes up with on the
Oh my
fly,
god.
he is the best. And the one rant which there's on YouTube, which was hilarious to watch. So it's a whole compilation of rants, right? So they would pick the different topics and then they would show the rants in sequence. So, for example, he talked about his watch.
Jonathan, they're called promos, not rants.
Okay, we can call them promos, but when it's Ric Flair, it's a rant.
Yeah, no, that's true.
So he'll talk about his gold watch and he's like, I got a gold watch. I bought in New York City. It's 10,000, 8,000, 15,000. Like you can see all those things. And then he's like, another one about his house. I got the biggest house on the biggest mountain, on the biggest side of town. $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. And all the numbers, and everything of that he talks about his Crocs, talks about his suits, custom made suits, talks about jet flying and he does this everywhere he goes. So they took the little segments, and it's amazing how he keeps embellishing it and keeps
Yeah,
moving
no, he's
along.
the best. And so here's a great Ric Flair story. So I worked with him for like these 3 days. We do all kinds of stuff around the city. We have a great time, and we're done. It's like Thursday afternoon at like 4 o'clock or something. He's not flying out until the next morning, and we're done. And I'm like, okay, so like, what do you want to do? He's like, he looks at me. He's like, do you have anything to do? And I'm like, well, no. Like I was just gonna go home, but that's about it. And he's like, can we go have dinner? And I'm like, sure. So we go out for dinner, and it's a beautiful summer night. And so we go sit at a restaurant in downtown Toronto called Club Lucky, which is right downtown. It's got a nice little patio. We're
You
sitting
went
out
to a
there
restaurant called Club Lucky with Ric
with
Flair.
Ric Flair. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, continue.
So we're sitting there, we have a beautiful steak dinner. We drink a few bottles of wine. And by this point, we're off the clock, right? So we're just having this great personal conversation. It was wonderful. When the bill came, I go to pay the bill, and he fought me over that bill for like 15 minutes. It was epic. Because I'm like, dude, we're working. He's like, no, we're off the clock. And I'm like, dude, I'm company. I should pick this up. He's like, I invited you for dinner. You're my friend. I'm picking this up. And this went back and forth for literally, it had to be at least 10 minutes. And finally, the waitress, she's just like standing there and she's like, I'm just going to close my eyes and grab a card. And that's what she did. But it was so like his insistence on buying me dinner. And when you're the publicist and you're the one with the expense account, that really rarely happens, right? You're expected to pick up the tab for everything because it's a company thing. But he insisted on buying me dinner to thank me for the work I had done for him. And that really meant a lot to me. It was really sweet. He was also there's a wrestling writer in Edmonton who's pretty connected still for a long time afterwards. I don't know if he still is, with a lot of the guys. And for like a year or two after that, I guess every single time Flair was in Edmonton for a reason and he happened to meet up with this person, my name would come up in a conversation somehow. And like the next morning I'd wake up, I'm like, oh, I have a voicemail from 3 a.m. And it'd be like, woo! Kind of
So,
awesome.
so what we see on TV with Ric Flair, the way he dresses and the way he talks, that is real life.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
There's a promo for the WDB network right now in between episodes of Raw and SmackDown where they're promoting Ric Flair, and Rick is saying the Ric Flair was not a character; it was a lifestyle.
Yeah, and I believe that. And I found that with a lot of the characters. I found that with a lot of the guys that their characters often seem to be built around some real part of their personality. And I think that the ones where it wasn't, they didn't ring true. And I think that a lot of the time those might not have been the characters that were terribly successful.
But like an example, like for example, the Undertaker, Mark Calloway. Apparently, he always stayed in character even off camera.
Yes,
Like,
I never spoke to him. Never spoke to him.
and he made sure when he was out in public and everything else, he didn't want to lose the mystique of the character.
Yeah.
The greatest character I think that they ever came up with, Undertaker was really good. I like the $1 Million Man one a lot.
Yeah.
And they flew Ted DiBiase down to Connecticut. They made him sign an NDA. They presented him to the character, and they put him in character. He was supposed to ride in limos, hand out money, and they're supposed to so fans would see this. Do you
Hmm.
know who was the original candidate for the $1 Million Man?
Was that you?
Yeah, okay. At 7 years old, they would not have
Okay,
me.
no, who was it? Who would have been the original?
Even at my advanced age now, I would not be the $1 Million Man. It was Ric Flair.
Yeah, that does not
Was
surprise me at all. That makes total sense, actually.
complete, right? But
Yeah.
he was at the time in NWA becoming WCW. He was
Yeah.
not a WWE guy, and Ted DiBiase was born to play that role. So I love that kind of stuff on how that comes together.